What is going on, yo? It's your boy Cuban Mike. You are listening to the podcast Ruckus Podcast, organized chaos in combination with 102.9 tape deck. And tonight we're having a Cuban takeover. Normally, I give you some great music with throwbacks, R&B, hip hop, etc., etc. Even sometimes I might give you some Cuban flavor. And sometimes I got the guys with me in the ruckus. But tonight we're having a Cuban takeover. And tonight in the building, I got a dear friend of mine. We've been cool now for, it's safe to say, what, a year now? A year and some change?
Over
July,
a year and a half.
over
Yeah.
years since July. This guy has been in the trenches with me, just trying to bring awareness to what's going on the big island of Cuba. Anytime there's been some kind of protest, some kind of organization or movement, he's been there with me. Um, it's safe to say, what are you, an entrepreneur, businessman, an author?
No. I work for a software company. I manage enterprise accounts. So I went to school for engineering, and I
Yeah.
work a regular job. So
Something like, but it's safe to say you're an author right now. Is it safe to say you don't want to, I'll call this an author.
yeah,
He
technically,
he's gonna be
yeah.
modest. He's gonna be modest, but he's an author right now. He's writing out there. He's writing little light books in these streets. But yeah, man, he's a dear friend of mine. I'm glad to have him on the show. We've been talking about it for months to try to have him through, and I finally got him. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you, Alejandro Pirez, man. What's going on, brother?
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. It's been an interesting fall with just not just the season changing and everything, but I got some life changes going on. I'm actually moving from Massachusetts to Florida after I bought a place down there, so going to try something new. As going into what we'll end up talking about, I'm going to be actually closer to the island of Cuba and to more
Yeah.
Cubans than I ever have in my entire life, growing up in Massachusetts. So it's going to be an interesting time. I'm looking forward to it, but just going to be different leaving New England. But in a way, maybe it feels like going a little closer to home. So
Yeah.
we'll find out how that is.
Well, I'll say this, man. I know you're going out there for a new beginning, man, and I'm so happy for you and congratulations on your new step. I will miss you because I ain't gonna have no one. Well, I'm gonna have some people on the side with me, but I remember, when I first met you, every time there was a movement there, you were always with me on my side next to Jordan and Sam. And thank you for being a partner and an ally and being down with us like that. And congratulations on your move. And hopefully it won't be the last time I'll see you because when I go to Florida, I'm hoping to hang out with you behind.
Yeah, I got plenty of room. I got a whole open guest bed, so whenever you want to get out of the cold, you always have a place to stay with me, man, for
You heard that, audience? He got me. So if something
sure.
happens and he doesn't pick up my call, then I'm gonna put him on blast. So yeah, man. So tell us about yourself. How did you got involved in this Cuban nonsense that we get into right now?
Sure, sure, yeah. So both my parents are originally from Cuba. My father came from Cuba to the United States in the 80s. He came on a boat with my grandparents, his siblings, and some other members from their community. And my mother came here on a plane a little bit later, or a little earlier in her life, um, in the 70s. So
Hmm.
my family story is pretty interesting. There was a big Cuban community in Jamaica Plain in Boston, and when you drive around JP, you can still see a lot of kind of the remnants of that. You have El Oriental de Cuba. You have I think it's a restaurant called like Miami Kitchen or something. But
Yeah.
my godmother, my madrina still lives there, so there's still a lot of kind of remnants of the Hispanic community in JP, though not as much,
Mm-hmm.
given kind of the demographic change there. But long story short, so I'm the third of three children. I'm the only son of my father and really of my whole family. I'm the only boy with my last name.
Okay.
And kind of growing up, I had this uh, pride in being Cuban, but I was always a little bit different from other kids in my high school. I grew up in Bolton, Massachusetts, which is a nice town, but a lot of American kids, and very, I didn't grow up around other Hispanics really. I didn't really even grow up, other than my family. I didn't really grow up around, and I really never grew up around other Cubans. So I meet a lot of
Hmm.
people that grew up in Miami or in South Florida that, the Cuban community is all they knew. And for me, that always felt like something that was far away from me, even though I wanted to be so close to it.
Yeah.
So going into the protests that were going on in Boston, when I saw on social media all the protests going on last July, I felt that I have a duty to my family, to my heritage, to be at that protest and to be actively involved. It's my, it's my duty to the country that my parents are from to participate in these events, to be part of our culture, and hopefully one day to see a free Cuba. And not showing up to these things would be an abdication of that duty. So, I need to be there, and I need to show up, and I need to participate.
Nice. Okay. Well said. Well said. It's very interesting because you grew up in Bolton, Massachusetts. So I grew up in Lawrence. I originally grew up in Jersey. So in Jersey, they actually have a Cuban community out there. There was a lot, Jersey, the second state that has the most Cuban next to Florida. So I had that thing. But when I moved to I moved to Lynn, then I moved to Lawrence, and it had Latino communities. They had Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, but they didn't have any Cubans. So even though there's a lot of similarities, a lot of things that are different. So how was it trying to navigate within your culture? Because in my case, and what happened with me, I either had to go to Jersey or Florida to get in tune with that culture. And it was hard because even to this day, when I tell them I live in Massachusetts and we have a little Cuban crew out here, they're like, they got Cubans in Massachusetts? And I'm like, yeah, it's hard to find them, but you'll find them. So well, first of all, how was it when you went through that last year and you found a whole bunch of Cubans around you that was actually involved with the same cause? And it's a two-part question. Is that one? And part two is, how was it trying to get in tune within your culture? How difficult was it, even though there wasn't that many of us around the area?
Sure. The first, I guess, to answer the first question, it was really, it's actually been pretty life-changing. Even my exposure to the Cuban community, the people that I knew in the Cuban community was very small. It was older people, but that all knew each other and knew of each other and their kids and stuff. And it was very a close circle. And I think what the movement did was it opened up all these new people from all over the state, students at different schools in Boston, Jordan, people that I don't think completely otherwise, I don't think I ever would have met, but not just met, also connected with. I talk with Jordan, texting and whatever, probably at least once a week or once every other week, and just making genuine friends and people that don't just feel close to me because of we grew up together or whatever, but because we really share a common goal for something that is beyond just the things that we do day to day. It's the vision and a dream of what a whole civilization, a whole society could look like on an island that once had that was taken away from us. So it's been really life-changing. And another thing too is, this is just something I've had a lot of exposure to your podcast, is the whole Afro-Cuban experience.
Yeah.
Right. Me being a white Cuban, this is all an experience I really have had no exposure to. It's just a reality. I grew up in small town, white Massachusetts, which was a great place to grow up in. But there's a whole nother side to the Cuban experience that I had without this whole movement, with everyone coming together and meeting each other. I never would have had exposure to that. And it's made a huge difference in terms of my understanding of what being Cuban really means. So I'm going to pause there.
Yeah, man. And the second part was how was it? How would you able to navigate, even though there's not too many of us? How much did your family, your parents were able to put that in you, knowing about that culture, that they had to leave and come back to the States because, us being the first generation being born here is one of those things we have to adapt to this because that's where we came from. But they had to adapt, leaving one country, pretty much escaping a regime to come out here. How was it for them to instill that culture to you?
Yeah. So my parents, I think my parents did a good job of making sure that I was part of the American experience, being part of this country and embracing the values and on all the cultural parts of what it means to be American, but to never allow me to forget where they came from. You know,
Yes.
my father is not a very emotional person except for very few things, and anything related to his time living in Cuba, growing up under communism, and living through that is something that he wanted to make sure was never forgotten. And I think that's one reason why my family and people in my family are very politically, I won't say active, but we're very in tune with world politics, is because
Yeah.
it does have a relevant effect on, it has had a relevant effect on how our family, on what's happened to our family. I mean, if I really think about it, the idea of having to pick up your whole life and leave the life you know for somewhere else because it's better somewhere else is something that's been foreign to me and so many other Cubans growing up here, because we've had it so good.
Yeah.
But we don't know what it's like to say, I have to get out of here because something terrible is happening. And that necessity hasn't been obviously something that I've had to go through, and a lot of Cuban Americans haven't had to go through that were born here. But the understanding of where that fear comes from, I think my parents did a good job of telling me to pay attention to the right things and make sure that that I was always aware of what was important and what needed to be carried into the future in terms of lessons from the past.
Yes. 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 And you never gone to Cuba yet, have you? You never got a chance to go there? So yeah,
No,
my story also. Yeah. That
you know,
our story, buddy. That's our story. That's our freaking story.
Doesn't know if I'm going to get arrested when I get off the plane. Like if they look at my social media or something, I just have. It's hard. It's one of those things where like once they get to you, you don't know when you're going back. So
Yeah. So yeah. That's where I'm at right now. And you know what? I always wanted to come back, but I know since my big mouth got me all over the damn place, I'm like, nah, I'm sticking around here for a few to see what happens.
Yeah,
Just roll the dice.
I'm looking at maybe going in February, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll see. It's just I'm gonna have to. It's gonna be it will not be a vacation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That way, it's gonna be a very spiritual experience. And I don't know. We're gonna have to see how that goes, but I think that there's a reason why I'm ready. Maybe God is saying, "Hey, you're ready at this point in your life to go do that." I'm 30. I just turned 30 years old, so I'm a little
Yeah.
older now. So we'll see. But kind of just quickly veering off into the part of the second question, the initial second question that you asked. So growing up in my part of Massachusetts, I never all my friends were American, like white American, and I have great friendships with them and everything. But because I had a Z at the end of my last name, my name was Perez. I was still always labeled a little bit different.
Yeah.
And what's interesting though is that even on the flip side, I always still also within the Latino community always felt like a little bit of an outlier as well, specifically. So
Yeah.
there's one story. It was one of my earliest memories that sticks out in my mind. It was maybe 1998 or something. It was late 90s, and my parents or my sister and I got invited to go on the field to Fenway Park to do like Hispanic Heritage Appreciation Night or something.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. So me and my sister is whiter than I am. She has blue eyes, brown hair. My sister and I get on the bus, and we sit down on the bus, and we look, and all the other kids are just staring at us. And we're like, what, we were kids, right? We're very young. We don't know what's going on. And,
Yeah.
little kids ask very blunt questions, but one girl asked, so like, why are you guys here? We're like, what are you talking about? They're like, well, isn't this for Hispanics only? And, and we said, yeah, like we're Hispanic too. They go, oh, no, you're not. Like you look different than us. Right. So it's one of those things, and kids are kids, and like it is what it is, right? Kids are just gonna call the world as they see it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just one of those things where growing up in Massachusetts, you'd still experience a little bit of slightly outside
You feel like an outsider. You feel like an outsider, and even a little bit of prejudice around there because they expect you to look a certain way. And I could relate that too. And I always say that we're Cubans, there's like no really middle with us. You either look really, really, really black like me, or you look really, really, really like you. There's no, I look a little bit of tan, a little bit of Taino, a little bit of native. I'm not saying that we don't exist, but you get either somebody look like Ted Cruz, or you're gonna look like somebody that look like Lance Alonso. So it's like, or somebody like Celia Cruz. So it's like a day and night kind of thing.
Yep.
So I definitely could relate to that. And even come to the point when I start speaking Spanish, they're like, "Oh, you speak Spanish?" It's like they seen like 4 eyes on me or something like that. So I could definitely relate on that department.
I mean, even overseas, like I was in Europe this year, and I told someone my name was Alejandro, that I'm Cuban. They didn't even people spoke like 3 languages, didn't even believe me. Right? I had to show my ID to show them that my name was actually Alejandro. Like, and this happens. This has happened. I've probably been asked just to like prove that my first name is what it is, like multiple times in my life, just because people either think I'm too I'm too white or too American or whatever it is.
Whatever,
right? Yeah. Like living in these types of different spheres. But it's interesting. The only time I've ever really felt like people there's none of that is really when I'm at the Cuban groups, when everyone who was there just gets it, because Cuba's such a diverse place. But it's just one of those things. It's a complex geopolitical situation, so I don't expect everyone to understand exactly the ins and outs of what happens there, but it's good to educate people.
Exactly. And okay, so I have to, now that you mentioned that, I got to go to the next question, which is this: we live in Massachusetts, and it's freaking socialist, communist, liberal city. There's no way to get around it. There's no way to get around it. At this point, after everything that's been going on for a year, because I had this conversation with a couple of people within the group, and it's like, because there's not too many of us, we're not on people's radar when it comes to the issues going on there. So, when things happened last year, they started asking like, "Yo, what's going on out there? Like, why is the protest going on? Why are people getting arrested?" You start asking these questions. They start asking you these questions, so you start giving these answers. Pre-July 11th, there were these people that were like pro-lift the embargo, and they were like, they didn't get it. So they thought it was just like, American being evil, and, the Cuban government just like these innocent bystanders that they just trying to do right for the people that we all know is bullshit. Post July 11th, within your circle and friends, I don't know if they have conversation about you, asking you questions, or if they even care, or if they was on the radar, but have they asked any questions on it, or do they even care for the most part, or have they even like got a chance to have an understanding, or do they get it?
Sure, I think that's a good question. I'd say my friends have definitely commented on like, hey, I saw you were at the different events, because I post some of them to Instagram or whatever. And some people definitely say, yeah, oh, that's, like, I think that's awesome that you're doing that. I had one girl, that was my friend's girlfriend, that said, hey, I just recently read a book on Cuba. It wasn't related to the movement, but she said, I understand how you could go from where you were to, from staying at home to going to these protests. I understand a little bit more now, reading through that. But I haven't really had specific, right. I haven't had my friends specifically asked about details to be educated on what's going on. But I think partially is because it's probably a conversation that they don't want, that because they don't know as much, they don't want to, I don't know, they don't want to strike up that conversation that could be kind of an intense one. So I would say they probably would like to know, but it's just one thing that it's not top of mind, or it's kind of a tough question to ask, because you don't know where it could go. But my friends have definitely shown support, because they know me, and they understand that it's something that's important to me on a fundamental level.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that, because when I did the last episode with the Black Cubans, because in my end, it was a shift, because there was people that they still romanticize the revolution, that they still think it's still a thing, and they thought that was for the people, not knowing it's for themselves. So a lot of things happened after July 11th, and that hit the spark. And because people that, I mean, I actually have friends of mine, like legit friends of mine, that were really like involved, like in love with the revolution. They thought that it was like the most righteous thing ever. And, that perception that he stuck it to the man. And pretty much, long story short, they romanticize the fuck out of it. There's no way to get around. They romanticize the fuck out of it, and they think it was just like the great thing that they ever did in history. But I always say like 98% of my friends got it. I still got those 2% are useful idiots, and I just let them be idiots. But they watch how they talk to me right now, because this time around I got an army in Boston and the Cubans, so now they're not gonna come and talk to me crazy. So I'm very happy that people are starting to get it. I'll share a quick story. I had a friend of mine that we really got into like an intense argument about this kind of thing, and it wasn't until he moved to Florida. And when he moved to Florida, that's Cuban Central. And what happened was he met a lot of elder statesmen that was actually like schooling him and telling him, this is what's really going on, and this is why we left, and this is what happened. So it went from him being a romanticized guy that thought, take the good with the bad, he became a little bit more compassionate. And he actually called me. He's like, yo, my bad. I didn't know. I didn't know. And I'm like, it's okay, you didn't know. But I'm like, you dickhead, I have my mother, my grandpa, like, my whole fucking family. Why do you think we're freaking anti-communist nutbags? Like, you had the cheat code the whole time. You had to go to Florida. Your answer was 10 minutes away from my house.
It's interesting. So there's a good phrase out there that says the truth cannot be taught and must be learned, right? Everyone has to learn on their own, whether they're taught a million times or not. Yeah. But there is this whole fantasization of the revolution. I think that's a generational problem. I think it comes from a lack of kind of a greater I don't know how to properly articulate this, but like, growing up, there was always, our parents had the Cold War, right? The Soviets, right, were always the enemy. There was always that larger force out there that could be a uniting force around the culture. And humans have always had this innate need to serve a higher purpose, or to go out there and be more than just people that go to work and come home and hang out, right? We want something beyond that. So I think through social media and other mediums of information, our generation looks at pictures and videos, and from our comfortable couches and our beds and our iPhones, we're able to romanticize about what it'd be like to be part of this movement.
Yeah.
When in reality, most of the people that support this revolution don't understand, as if the revolution were to actually happen, after the movement's done with them, they'd line them up with the rest of the quote unquote trespassers and kill them in firing squad.
Yeah, you become a statistic. You're a number to them now. You're just a number.
Yep. You are a lot of the people that support this crazy overthrow, this revolution. They all would be for it until they realize that the revolution does not, just because you say you support them, they go and they eat their own, and they execute their allies too. They don't care.
Early.
And you see that coming a lot from a lot of more, I don't want to say privileged people, but relative to the rest of the world, to human history, we're pretty privileged folks.
Yeah.
And we can't, just because something looks cool on an iPhone doesn't mean that it's cool when you're living through it. So
yeah. And that's the thing. And we always Cubans, like from our parents' generation, they still got like this paranoia that it might come within this country. I'm still being optimistic and say it's not going to happen. But I could understand why they still get a little bit paranoid, especially with the nonsense we've been dealing in this freaking state. I get it. So that's why I always feel like you got to be on your P's and Q's and always just be aware on what's going on with politics and what's going on within our system, from like the lower level to the higher ups. So I always tell people to just be aware and don't just get caught up with the romanticism. Just peep game how people are just doing you. And not only that, listen to each other's stories, because I know with Florida, Cubans, they hold a lot of political weight out there, and they think that, we get a bad rep because we vote Republican. And I used to like really attack them But then once I got involved with this movement, and even once my family voted a certain way, like I respect it and I don't agree with it, but I get it. And they do more better on getting, they do a better job of them getting of us getting their vote as to the other side, because they know how to talk to us. They know where we come from, and they know that, look, this might come for you and we're not rocking with that. So join us on that section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it also comes down, so most of our issue are not our issues. The biggest questions that we have to ask as a society, and I think these are the questions that the movement that we have with Cuba are based around, is what are fundamental human rights, right? Where do those rights come from, right? And this is why I think the American experiment is so special, because in the United States, the founding principle is that there are certain inalienable rights that transcend, that are go beyond human existence, that come from God. You could say it's a higher power. You could say there is, whatever it is. The point is that there are rights that predate government, right? And it's government's job to protect those innate human rights from being, or to protect those rights and to stop those rights from being infringed upon by both people and by government itself, right? So that's why Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence says, right, that governments were basically created by man to protect these rights with the consent of the governed, right? So the people give their consent and some power to the government to protect their fundamental rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
So happiness,
right? So, and I think the reason why a lot of Cubans will tend more conservative Republican is because that is a much more popular message on the political right, is that, hey, we love the Declaration of Independence and we love the Constitution, and those things that enshrine the rights to free speech that have all, right, those types of rights, the right to bear arms, that have been taken away from the Cubans, right? They've seen the story. They've watched this movie before in Cuba. They know what happens when those rights are ran over. So it comes down to those fundamental rights and stopping those from being taken away, so that what happens in Cuba doesn't happen in the United States.
And look, I have a lot of Cuban friends, and my mom has a lot of Cuban friends, and the one country that she was trying to win was Venezuela, and this is back in 2003. She had a bunch of friends in 2003. Like, look, when Chavez was running things, he was like, look, we seen this movie before. He's gonna do this. He's gonna do that. I give you guys no less than 10 years, and something's gonna happen to y'all. And look what happened.
Yep. Now they have wheelbarrows of cash, and they're shooting dogs in the street to eat, because all socialism does is it takes existing resources and it just sucks them dry, and it gives them out to the people, when in reality it's market systems that allow production of goods and services to be done at the best level, to allow the society to become prosperous. It's interesting. I had a friend of mine who is on a different political side than I am, but we were talking about different world politics, and he talks about Venezuela, and he says, oh, the U.S. is crushing Venezuela with their sanctions. And I asked him, I was like, basically, do you know who Hugo Chavez is? Do you know what happened with Hugo Chavez? He goes, no, who's Hugo Chavez? I'm like, well, we can't have a conversation.
Off to a bad start.
Right? We can't have a conversation around geopolitical issues if you don't know these very basic historical facts. And what's troublesome is that there are a lot of people in our generation look at the state of the world and they want to blame America. They want to blame the powerful country, the oppressor, whatever, right? But they don't have a complete story. They just look at things in frozen time, in the present day, and that's not a way to do a full analysis on what to do in terms of politics.
And that's what happened to us, because every time they talked about American being evil with Cuba, they blamed the freaking embargo, and I'm like, yo, before you even mention the embargo, you got to go before what happened pre the embargo, why it went down the way it did, and they either don't know it. Most of them don't even know it. I'll say that most of them don't even know it, and then some of them because they want to be like anti-American and disgruntled Americans, they were like it's still Americans' fault just because. So even when you throw facts in their face, they're still very dismissive about it, and that's the part that gets nasty. And we're still trying to fight the good fight. And even on the other side, man, I talked about it with this group. They're doing so much nasty stuff to us that it makes. I mean, I vote a certain way, but I think I'm gonna have to stop because you already know the stuff that we're going through here with the city council. That's number one. And then I don't know if you heard about that kid in Orlando that won the Congress thing. I forgot his name, but
I know I've seen him. Yeah,
he ran as a Cuban, and then come to find out he was Puerto Rican the whole time. I mean, so this is what y'all doing to us right now, to vote, quote unquote, a progressive way.
Cuban, the reality is the Cuban identity, the Cuban community, all these left-wing politicians are using Cuba as a political football to score political points so that they can look better in front of their friends, so that they can rise up in the ranks. The Boston City Council does not know the people that voted to not support the embargo. Those people don't have an ounce of understanding of what's going on in Cuba. And if they do, then they're just acting knowing that they're scoring political points.
Yeah.
If they truly believed in fundamental human rights and that role, right, what we talked about, the role of government to protect human rights, they would never vote that way. But they don't see it. They are in their own fantasy land where they think if they say the right things and do the right things without actually seeing the consequences of the policies that they say that they're supporting, then they can just go and score their points, and they can go tweet about it later and try to go from city councilor to mayor, and then from mayor to state to representative, and from representative to senator. I mean, that's all it is. Yeah. It's just climbing up the ladder.
Yeah, which it's really going to cost them in the long run, because it's really going to make them look like they're just deplorable human beings in the long run.
In the meantime, though, it'll cost the people. It'll cost the people of the state. It'll cost these policies and this belief that these principles are not the right principles, are not good, just moral principles of protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That this will lead to what we see happen, and this is my fear. San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, Washington, Seattle, Washington, that Boston is on that track.
Yeah. And
now they have the legislative ability to basically turn it into that. I mean, the city council meeting that I watched before the embargo vote, it sounded like almost like a quasi-political podcast. Everything they were talking about had nothing to do with real, like it sounded more like political fluff than it did actual city government doing its job. And it was sad. And I got out of Boston.
Yeah. So it's just a whole big mess. All right, hold on. Yeah, man. So like I was saying, one of the things that I'm happy about us, this generation right now, we're trying to change the perception on how Cuba's being portrayed, because a lot of things, I don't even, you were too young to remember, but like during the Obama years, I know when I was checking out the voting and stuff like that, like he won twice. And the Democratic Party was very happy about it, because Florida was supposed to be like very conservative. Then it got kind of purple sometimes it got red and blue, whatever the case may be. So once Obama won twice, they were happy, and they thought it was gonna progress and it was gonna shift to blue. But what they failed to recognize that you still have the Cuban youth, and they were so caught up with the old parents that they were like, okay, it's going to change because the only people that are voting red are like the old conservative parents that are still stuck in the Batista years, and they were either like the privileged or they had their things and they left. So now this new generation, they're gonna go a certain way. But what they failed to realize was, even though we do sometimes, for the most part, we think progressive way, we didn't forget why our parents left the country to begin with. So, for example, with my mother, she voted for Obama. She voted for Obama, and then after she voted for Obama, and what I keep telling people, what messed his whole thing was a trip to Cuba.
That's what I remember seeing that on TV.
Yeah, that's what messed him up, because we were happy at first because we thought, okay, he's going to set them straight and say, look, this is what the hell we want. If you want this kind of change, or we're going to, we thought he's going to stick his chest out and, I mean business. And he didn't mean any business. He pretty much gave them everything, and we got hit with nothing. And it became to the same old politics. So it was like, oh, okay, not only we're going to go red, we're going to go super red. As you can see what happened with the midterms. So as the world was looking like, oh, he did this, like, the people that are not Cuban, they looked at it as a great thing. Like, oh, he went and, try to have negotiation with them. And, the one thing that they failed to realize, they didn't come to us, the community. Because when he first ran, I remember him going to the front and say, like, I'm going to do you guys right. We're going to work this out, and I'm here for you. And then 8 years later, that went out the window. So what happened is now they failed to recognize that, with us, the new generation, like, yeah, it's not over yet. We're here for a reason, and our parents came here for a reason. So it's not like, forget what these, like, what the old folks are saying. No, we're here because of them. So we have to honor that, and we have to serve that. So you're going to have to do right by us, because if now we're still going to go to that other side until you get us. And unfortunately, they still been kind of tone deaf, and they still haven't gotten us, because you got like these news media outlets. I don't know if you keep up with the Young Turks. You watch those guys online?
Yeah, I know who they are.
Yeah, I used to be a fan of those guys, and then they just went elsewhere with their whole agenda. So between those guys and the Hill, like they've gone like so far off to the left, it's become ridiculous. But they still get toned up with the conversation, thinking like, it's still the embargo. So I think with this new generation that we're now, thanks to social media, we're able to to bring awareness and bring a bigger voice more than ever. And I'm optimistic. I'm still very optimistic. I see something's still going to happen, but with social media, we're still able to bring awareness more than ever. So between social media, even what I'm doing right now with the podcast and everything that we have all these networks and all these tools to use it as our advantage, and that scares them, because they can't control the narrative like that anymore. Now we get the chance to control our narrative and tell the stories. That's why it's so important for me to not only share the stories that what my mother went through and my father went through. I can also share awareness of what goes on with the Black Cuban community, because there's been this terrible misconception for years, thinking that we just adore this guy and he was like our savior and he came saved us from the evil man. And it's been total horseshit, and I cannot stand it.
I mean, this is a kind of a new viewpoint to me. I didn't really know I didn't know any of this, right? That you felt this way about Obama, and that you have other people that you've talked to that, you get roped into people thinking that you think a certain way. And I think that's really, it definitely makes sense. And if you look at the foreign policy from Obama and now from President Biden, especially after the protest last summer, there was virtually no action.
Nothing.
Right?
Nothing.
There was no action. There was no. The one thing that Senator Marco Rubio was calling for was for them to do the internet balloons.
Freaking internets! They couldn't even do that.
Puerto Rico, but the problem is there is a belief that comes from this line of foreign policy that we can please and negotiate our way through bad actors, through these types of governments, and that we can just get them to see the light someday, and we can get them to turn, to start to turn the corner and to join and hold hands and going into this brave new world. But that's just not.
The regime doesn't work like that. The regime doesn't work like that.
And these governments, they all just take advantage of the United States. And it's the same with Iran, too. Iran is cracking the skulls of protesters, shooting people in the streets right now. And what do we have going on? Just a few months ago, we had our State Department trying to work out another nuclear deal, right? Where in the past we sent them pallets of cash, right? I mean, this is not, when you have regimes like this that are against human rights, that are dictatorships, they don't care what kind of concessions they make. Any concession you make to them, they're just going to seize on.
Yeah.
Right. This is what I have to explain to people. When you go and there's quote unquote trade that's open for Cuba, Cuba's open for business. That's just more money that goes to the pockets of the communists. The people don't get that money. Yeah, they might see a little bit of aid, but that's all facade. That's just all the Cuban leaders, the people in the Cuban communist leadership. They send, you see the Instagram of their kids. They don't keep their kids in Cuba.
They look like rappers. They look like rappers.
Yeah, their kids go to the best schools. They go to Paris. They go to Rome. They're all over the place. And why is that?
And here's the thing that kills me. Like, you know, one of the things, the propaganda they try to sell, like, you know, we have free education and we have the best education, but none of their freaking kids go to school in Cuba. None of them. They go to school in Europe. Yeah. All their kids go to school to Europe, and they pump like they got the best, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And it's just so freaking frustrating because you see it, what's going on right in front of your eyes, and they still go like this. They still go like this.
It's the more you really think about it, there is a communist, not just a socialist, even a communist country 90 miles from our shores that barely has a military. Right, that for some reason is still communist.
Yeah,
that used to be a pro-Western government, pro-capitalism, pro-free markets. It actually, when you really think about it, it blows the mind. This isn't Russia. This isn't China. This is right here in the Western Hemisphere.
Yep,
and
it's nuts.
And the idea, you know. Obviously, where we talk about what do we want to do next? Obviously, we don't want military intervention into Cuba.
Well, you know, no, the right guy, and I don't know, man.
Something really terrible happens, you know, and maybe the point is something terrible has been happening the whole time, right? Maybe the only way to get rid of these people is just to go kick them out.
No, I've got it right now because I was against that right now, but I'm running out of options because, like, okay, because you know our enemies are like, well, you can't say you know, you can't do intervention because, you know, you're gonna kill people. Then you can't end a coup because they're gonna, you know, we're sticking our nose doesn't belong. Then, you know, we tried, you know, the embargo thing. You're starving the people, and what the case may be. So I'm like, what we got left?
Starving.
Yeah, what do you got left here? What do you got left?
Yeah, well, I think, and that just real quickly, that's why the Second Amendment is so important in the United States. You need the ability to adequately fight back against the government. You know, people think, oh, well, what's an AR-15 going to do against a Predator drone? It's a good point, but what did the Taliban do to us in Afghanistan? They kicked our asses out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
People still have to fly planes. People still have to get in tanks. They still have to eat. Right. I mean, Castro again was an armed revolutionary, but you know, the big point here is that Cuba, it's interesting. You see all these news articles of another building falls apart, like literally falls down, like falls, just like is no longer standing because it collapsed.
Yeah.
And then another building, and then like there's some other disaster over here, and then a disaster over there. And it makes you wonder, how much time do these people have? Like, the country literally is falling down. How much longer can they keep this cash cow going for these people? And it can't last forever.
It can't. And you know, I was seeing somebody on YouTube, and it's getting kind of scared because people are so starving. I mean, it was a scare tactic, but then because people are so desperate, you don't let pass nothing amongst anyone once they're starving. It like they got scared that it might get to a point that you know it might turn to some kind of form of cannibalism because people are just like starving so much.
Well, if that happens, then you know, do whatever you have to do at that point, send in the troops. But you know, I always make a joke that if they found oil reserves under the island, there'd be U.S. troops. There'd be U.S. troops on the island.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. And I always said to myself, I always said to myself, if we would have had diamonds, oil, like
Yeah,
something that
diamonds,
worked,
oil, lithium, whatever
something.
it was. If it was there, you bet they would find some excuse
And
to invade.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then they'll hide under the facade. Yeah, yeah, we're doing this all of the string of democracy. Yeah, sure you are. But unfortunately,
If the world still needed the sugar from Cuba, they'd be over there.
yeah,
We've just figured out the sugar problem. That's the only thing. Otherwise, Cuba, when it was quasi imperialized by the United States after the Spanish American War, one of
yeah,
the big reasons was because of the sugar exports that we
yeah,
did.
we were killing them with that. We were killing them with the sugar.
But then it got figured out. But it is the way it is. But you know, kind of looking into the future, I do think there is a I do so this is I think a couple of things are going to happen at some point. I think the regime will fall. Will it be in my lifetime? Who knows? You and I are going to get very old. We have modern medicine.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but the question is going to be not just what replaces it, because once it falls, there's going to be the U.S. is going to intervene immediately. I think.
yeah,
What I'm most concerned about. So there's the good part. The good news is there are millions and millions, if not billions of dollars of actual Cuban American money on the sidelines, ready to go back and build the country tomorrow. I think Cuba overnight, not overnight, but within a very short period of time, given all the Cubans around the world who have gone and thrived, would be back rebuilding the island very quickly.
yeah.
My concern is that if the regime falls and the United States gets in there, that you get the financial cartel and the big interests that go in there and try to exploit Cuba to be the next third world capitalist nation in the Western Hemisphere, where they can get cheap labor and have cheap tech offices, and
And that's what we need to avoid. That's what we need to freaking avoid, because then we don't want another Batista era where we just get exploited. And that's what happened the last go around. So the same way they didn't want to get involved when we needed our help, we needed their help. I think.
well, I mean, even a step beyond that. At least during the Batista era, at least there was an economic parity. Like there were people that were living middle class in Cuba that lived way better off than most parts of the United States. That could take their money and their resources and go to the U.S. and actually be wealthy or be okay, right? Like Cuba was almost like a 51st state, right? It was had the best.
We were killing it.
America.
We were killing, and then with the mob doing their nonsense, we were like damn near Vegas.
Yeah, that's true. Maya Rolensky was a frequent flyer down in
Yeah, yeah.
But what I'm afraid of is, say we get we get a free Cuba, we get this whole economic system. What I want to avoid is Cuba being, hey, I'm a large company with billions of dollars. I just bought up half the block in Havana, and I'm gonna go and pay, everyone $3 an hour to go do whatever. Like, I understand that there's economic realities, but I don't want Cuba to be boxed into. I want the prior economic prosperity that Cuba had to come back, and what I don't want to see is big corporate interests turn Cuba into a cheap labor factory that has
pretty much turn to China, pretty much.
Yeah. In terms of the economics there, I mean, the proximity to the U.S. would still protect that, but or in India, where they pay, engineers are paid a lot less than they are here, even though they're just as they're very, very good at their jobs. But I don't want to see Cuba turn into a secondary labor market, right? Maybe that's where things end up, but I want to avoid it if I can. But corporate interests are going to do everything they can to make that happen.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, let's cross our fingers, man. It's still a toss up in the air, and I'm still really optimistic that the regime will fall and we will have a free Cuba. And I'm at a point now. I'm just hoping it happen in my mother's lifetime. That's all. If she lives, if our parents could live to see that, then I'm content.
I think that would probably be a top 3 moment of my life if I could be with my father when the regime. I mean, it would. I couldn't even put into words. I almost get chills just thinking about what
Yeah.
that moment would feel like, and what it's just it feels like almost like a movie that hasn't been made that is going to get made, but
Yeah.
it's real life.
Yeah. So and I mean just quick sidetrack. I mean, when the first wave that came over here was my mother, my father, my uncle, and my grandfather. My uncle passed away, so he wasn't able to see that. My grandfather, he's pretty much on his last leg, so I don't think he's gonna be able. So I'm down to my last two right here. So hopefully they'll be able to see a free Cuba before anything happens. So I'm just crossing my fingers on that department.
Well, this is
And
the tricky part. The tricky part is when they're gone, right? We know that we want to take up the fight and continue on the political activism. The question is, and I think this is our biggest challenge as being younger Cuban Americans, is not fading away into the American lifestyle where being Cuban is just something that you have on paper and that you know nothing about.
yeah,
And I know several people from my just growing up or people in my adult life that are, half Cuban, and that are great people and everything, but they almost know nothing about the heritage that they have no idea. They don't speak Spanish.
yeah,
They probably couldn't tell you Celia Cruz is like and it's not that it's not necessarily a bad, like they're not, it's nothing bad. It's just something that as Cubans come here and succeed and make a life for themselves, it's what I really, one thing I am somewhat fearful of is that enough Cuban youth kind of fade away from the movement and people don't care as much, and the regime can just, a lot of the enemies of the regime end up just going away and they can continue indefinitely without people that remember what they did.
and that's the thing because I get where you come from that because the thing that gets scary about that is that you have Cubans that have no idea what they're getting into, and then they'll use them as a prop to be like, we should lift the embargo because we got this Cuban right here that say we should lift the embargo, and that's what happened. Okay, remember the video I posted up with that dude that lied about the Peter Pan?
Yeah.
There's more to that video, and I didn't get a chance to post it. But in the video, he had a Cuban person who I don't think she was Cuban, but I'm gonna give him that right now because we got this new trick now. We got people that are not Cuban claiming that they're Cuban to fit a certain agenda. But he was like, "Yeah, we need to lift the embargo because I got a Cuban friend that we should lift the embargo," and he brought a Cuban girl to say they should lift the embargo because it's for the family or whatever the case may be. So the thing that gets scary that you got people that don't know their history trying to push a certain agenda, and because they got so-called progressive ideology, which I'm getting to know with that word because the word progressive right now is just a cute word of saying socialist or communist right now, the way they're freaking moving. But they're using them as a prop to push their sick agenda. So that's the part that I get afraid of also. But that's what happened with us because as our parents got kind of fed up with Cuba and they started not talk about it as much. They used that as the agenda, be like, okay, the old folks are gone, we got the new kids, and now we're gonna push the agenda. But then we came along and said, no, we're not having that. So I think I think that was up to us to teach these new kids, like, look, this is what we're fighting for, this is what's going on, and this is why you should stand for this cause, and this is what Cuba's about. And I think as long as we keep that momentum going, we could still fight the good fight. And that's what happened with those kids that are your friends that are half Cuban and whatever the case may be. I'm probably going to assume that their parents just came over here and be like, you know what, since we're not coming back here, we're just going to live in this country, get Americanized, and Cuba just not existing anymore. And they just got accustomed to that, and it became what it became.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah.
And it's there's nothing wrong with coming here and thriving and building a better life for yourself. That's what we all strive for. That's what we all hope to do, right? The question is, after we've received these gifts and of freedom and prosperity in the United States, do we owe it to our past and our ancestors to, try to use some of that to be part of taking back the island that was taken away from them? And I think my other thing that I see happening in the future is now that we have a whole generation of Cubans that are, I mean, everyone I talk to in the Cuban community, honestly, that the way that they have succeeded in all aspects of life all over the world is so incredible. You know, doctors and engineers and, you know, even people in media. I mean, everywhere.
We prosper.
Everywhere.
What the fucking shit? What the shit? We prosper. Anytime we go, we turn lemon to lemonade.
And I think what I'm hopeful for is that this whole generation, 1, 2, 3 generations of success is going to really be a big war chest.
Yeah.
For this movement. And, you know, we'll wait and see, but it's also going to be on us as well, I think, to continue not just the work too, but eventually have, for me, I definitely want to have kids and have a new generation of kids that were raised the way I were, not forgetting where their family comes from. And, you know, as I get older, maybe be ready for the fight too.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you know, this movement, every movement is just one person at a time.
Yeah, definitely, man. So, all right, man, we're about to get out of here, man, because it's getting late and I gotta go eat and then probably get a drink or two. But before we get out of here, what the hell's going on with the Patriots?
Oh, the Patriots.
What the hell's going on with our Pats?
All right, the defense is unbelievable. Matthew Judon is sick.
Okay.
Special teams is unbelievable. Mac Jones cannot throw a football down the field. I don't care what anyone says. We talked about this. Mac Jones is average, maybe even below average. He's not going to lead us to a Super Bowl. And if he somehow does, and this podcast is online, then I will happily eat those words. I will be rooting for the Pats forever. I don't see it. I think there's just better teams in the Mahomes. I don't know how we ever get over the Chiefs in a playoff game with Mac Jones, right? Mahomes for the next 10 years. It's just, I don't see it, or Josh Allen. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Is it safe to blame Belichick now after all these years? Can we? Because right now, Tom proved to him I could get one without you.
It's tough to say.
I'm blaming Belichick.
I don't blame Brady for moving on, and it was probably the right move for him. And I don't blame the Pats for also wanting to look toward the future. Right now, we don't really have an offensive coordinator. We have Matt Patricia, who's a defensive guy calling offensive plays, so that makes no sense. But that said, right now the team is 5-5. They're not bad, and the AFC East is actually stacked. Yeah. I mean, if I just look at the division right now, I mean, the Pats are at the bottom. No, sorry, we're 5-4. We're above 500. So, I mean, if you look at the AFC East, the Dolphins are 7-3. The Jets and the Bills are both 6-3. We know how good the Bills are.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, this team is competitive in a very tough division. So there's going to be a lot of divisional play that comes up, and we're going to see how that goes. But if they can find a way to win and maybe sneak into the playoffs again and then address some of their weaknesses in the offseason, they could be okay. It's just we have to get used to not being, 1 or 2 seed every year. We were spoiled for so many years.
We were spoiled. We're so freaking spoiled. We had it good.
What it's like to move on.
We had it good, man. We had it freaking good. All right, man. Well, Alejandro, man, thank you. Thank you for stopping by, man. Thank you for blessing us with your presence. I know it's not going to be the last time I'm going to see you because I will take that trip to Florida to visit you behind. Before you officially leave here, I don't know when you officially leave, but we definitely got to get some drinks. I know a spot.
So I obviously I've been back and forth throughout the year, but I'm going to be in Florida for good after Thanksgiving. So.
Wait, Thanksgiving? All right. So, so after Thanksgiving, you out?
Yeah.
Oh, so that means you won't be around for my birthday. All right. I'm
sorry.
It's all right. Understandable. When is it? The 28th. Monday. November.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in the Sunshine State on my porch drinking a whiskey.
All right, gotcha. So, okay, we'll talk behind the scenes. We will talk behind the scenes. But yeah, thank you for everything, man. We'll definitely do a part 2. You know what I mean? This will probably get the crew with us this time around. This your boy Cuban Mike. You've been listening to the Ruckus in combination with 102.9 Tape Deck. This has been the Cuban Takeover, and we're out here for our peoples. Fight the vida to the death, and we will see you for Cuba sometime soon, and God willing, it'll be in our lifetime. We are out of here. Peace.
Peace. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem, man.